There's no franchise quite like Sonic the Hedgehog. For over 30 years, it's given us some of the most iconic games ever made, thanks to its unique high-speed platforming, large cast of fun characters, incredible music, and overall charm. The quality is a bit erratic, with some games being not so good to say the least, but even those are just so interesting to talk about. I don't know how to explain it, but when you really enjoy Sonic games, you're always going to be fascinated by them, no matter what. It's like an incurable disease. Is that normal? Do I need help? Don't answer that. If the answer isn't in a Sonic game, I don't care. I've been a massive fan of the series ever since I was 9 years old, and I'm so excited to share my thoughts on it. Because of the vast library of Sonic games, I'm going to have multiple retrospectives organized thematically, rather than discuss the series in a purely chronological order. I think it makes more sense this way. And it all starts at the very beginning, with, for lack of a better descriptor, the classic Sonic retrospective. Now, this doesn't include the spin-offs featuring this version of the character, or games where he's not the main focus. Rest assured, I'll discuss those at a later time. In this retrospective, we'll be covering classic Sonic's most important games, the original trilogy plus CD from the 90s, and then his revival in the late 2010s. The first one we'll be talking about is Sonic the Hedgehog on the Sega Genesis. But before we get into that, I'd appreciate it if you could subscribe. I really want to grow this channel, so clicking the button would help me out so much. Thank you, and I hope you enjoy the video. The year was 1990, and Sega was in a fierce competition with Nintendo as the two biggest gaming console companies, with the Sega Genesis and the Super Nintendo. Sega wanted a new mascot who could better compete against Nintendo's Mario than their current one, Alex Kidd, who I honestly forgot existed before making this video. Poor guy. The goal was to make an iconic character in the same league as Mickey Mouse. Sega tasked two people with creating the mascot and his game. Programmer Yuji Naka and character designer Naoto Oshima. Multiple designs were considered when creating the character, like a rabbit and an armadillo. But eventually Oshima settled on a blue hedgehog who could run fast. He was named Sonic to emphasize his speed. He was originally supposed to have a human girlfriend named Madonna and be in a band, but those ideas were scrapped. The team would grow to 7 people, and in 1991, it was released to massive success. Now, I was born in 2000, so the classic Sonic games weren't my introduction to the character. My first game in the series was Sonic Advance, which I got when I was like 5 or 6, so it was actually one of the first games I ever played. I liked it, but wasn't able to beat it back then. I played a little of Sonic Heroes at a family friend's house, and that was it as far as my exposure to Sonic games. But when I was 8 or 9, I discovered YouTubers like AntDude and Some Call Me Johnny who were playing games like Sonic 3 and Sonic Adventure 2, and then I wanted to try those games. I got the Sonic Mega Collection on the GameCube and started playing the series in order. I played Sonic 1 first, and it didn't really grab me. I liked Sonic 2 and 3 more, so I didn't revisit this game. Then in 2017, I downloaded the remake on iOS by Christian Whitehead or Taxman, and I really enjoyed it. I played this version so much, and I consider it to be the best way to play Sonic 1. There are so many ports of the classic Sonic games, and I thought hard about which ones to play for these reviews. Ultimately, I decided I'm going to play Sonic Origins Ultrafix, which is a mod for the PC version of the Sonic Origins collection that fixes a lot of issues I have with it. There are a few reasons I decided to do this. 1, I want to encourage buying these games from Sega rather than telling you to use a Genesis emulator. 2, most of my playtime with classic Sonic comes from the Taxman ports, which are the versions this collection is building off of. 3, this is the version I use when replaying these games. And 4, I love the new features like widescreen and the animated cutscenes. I'm not going to use the new options that affect gameplay to try and give a more authentic review of each game. In the next video, I'll talk more about these added features and my problems with the regular Origins collection. But now it's time to dive into the game. The story is Sonic is a super fast hedgehog who lives in South Island. He discovers that his animal friends have been trapped inside these dangerous robots. He learns the person responsible is a mad scientist named Dr. Ivor Robotnik, or Dr. Eggman as he's called in later games. So Sonic rushes after Eggman to free his friends, many of whom are trapped inside these robot generators at the end of each zone. It's a very simple story. The game is a 2D platformer centered around speed. Sonic can run quickly through levels, and he can increase his speed by going through loops or running down hills and rolling himself into a ball, which you do by holding down on the D-pad. It's exhilarating how fast you can go in this game. The goal is to always be moving quickly, but you can't do it all the time. Sometimes you need to slow down, or else you'll run face first into an enemy, and other times the levels have methodical platforming that require waiting in place for a bit. The levels have great replay value because that's when you have a better understanding of when you can go fast, since you already know what's coming. Another great part about replaying stages are the alternate paths. For example, in Green Hill Zone Act 2, there's one route where you keep going forward the whole time, but there's another path hidden to the left, behind these spikes, that takes you to a bottom area with different level design that also gives you access to some power-ups. The two routes eventually converge to the same point, but this feature gives the stages a lot of variety when you play them. It's very satisfying how I've played these games countless times, and I'm still finding routes I've never been through before. Usually you want to stick to the upper paths and levels that are harder to reach, but have more collectibles, are less dangerous, and are faster to go through. The game is played with just one button that makes Sonic jump in the air and curl into a ball that attacks enemies as long as he hits them. He can even bounce off them, which is pretty fun. Rolling also hurts enemies, so it's helpful to be in the ball form as much as possible if you suspect enemies are nearby. The controls being this simplistic was Yuji Naka's idea, and I think it helped a lot of people get into the game because it's so easy to understand. And playing as Sonic feels as smooth as butter. You always feel like you're in complete control of him, whether he's doing some regular platforming or going crazy fast. Yuji Naka is the GOAT. Oh. Hashtag legalize insider trading. Sonic 1 has a very unique approach to taking damage. There are these collectibles in stages called rings that Sonic is constantly grabbing. When you get hit, you lose all your rings, and a maximum of 20 scatter around you that can be picked up again before they despawn. As long as you have at least one ring, you can be comfortable. But when you have no rings and you get hit, Sonic dies and you lose a life. Unless you're playing the game on the Origins collection like me, which doesn't have lives, but you get the point. It's a very cool system that works well with the fast pacing, since you usually have to stop what you're doing to grab all your rings when you get hit, which makes you want to avoid taking damage even more than if Sonic just had a regular health bar. But that isn't the only thing rings do. If you collect 100 of them, you get an extra life, and they add up to a score bonus when you beat a stage. Beating the level quickly adds to the score as well. The last function of the rings is if you have 50 of them and reach the end of the level, a giant ring appears that you can jump into. This transports you to a special stage where Sonic falls and jumps through an area as the screen is constantly rotating around him. Completing one of these stages gives Sonic an item called a Chaos Emerald, and getting all of them unlocks the good ending. The emeralds don't change anything in the gameplay, but collecting them adds challenge to the game. Although not in the best way. I've never been a big fan of the special stages in Sonic 1. It's hard to process what's happening or feel like I'm in control because everything is moving very fast. You want to be very patient playing these, which is kind of ironic when you consider this game is about speed. All it takes is one little mistake, and you're helpless as Sonic is kicked out of the special stage because of these red bumpers that are called gold for some reason. The structure of the game is there are 6 zones to run through, with each of them containing 3 acts. But only Acts 1 and 2 let you access special stages at the end of them. That's because Act 3 ends with a boss fight instead of a goalpost. There are 6 Chaos Emeralds in the game, so you have a decent amount of chances to get them all. Unfortunately, this leads into my main issue with Sonic 1. The stages and the pacing. Some zones are fantastic, like the first and fifth ones, Green Hill and Starlight Zone. It feels great to run fast in these places and explore the different paths. There's a reason Green Hill Zone is one of the most iconic levels in all of gaming. It's a blast to play through. But other zones are much less exciting. The second one is Marble Zone, which is so much slower paced than Green Hill. There's a lot of waiting and regular platforming to do. And don't get me wrong, that's okay, but the speed is drastically reduced, and it just feels a bit out of place, especially coming off the rush that was Green Hill Zone. But that's nothing compared to Labyrinth Zone. This stage is infamous because the gimmick is you're underwater most of the time, and Sonic substantially slows down in water. So the stage is very, very slow paced, and it's not much fun to play through. It just doesn't feel like you're playing the same game. I should also point out that Sonic can drown underwater, which along with crushing in bottomless pits, will insta-kill him. So you need to make sure he takes in these air bubbles, or else this super ominous countdown will tick down until he dies. Jesus Christ, my bad. Originally, this was going to be the second level in the game, and thank God they moved it to the fourth, because that would have been some crazy whiplash after Green Hill Zone. The other stages I haven't mentioned yet are Spring Yard and Scrap Brain Zone. These levels strike a good balance between speed and platforming, especially depending on your skill level. They seem slow at first, but you can go fast in them once you know what you're doing. Although it is kind of suspicious how the last act of Scrap Brain is just a recolored Labyrinth Zone. Not a big fan of that. So the stages overall are good, but Marble and Labyrinth Zone hold them back from greatness. Returning to the pacing, if you're going for all the Chaos Emeralds, that slows down the game even more, since you need to beat at least 6 of the acts with 50 rings. And if you get hit near the end, sometimes there just aren't enough rings left to reach the special stage, and you're unable to go backwards for more. This meant I needed to play even more patient through levels, like Labyrinth Zone Act 1. Ugh, getting into the special stage here was not fun. You don't have to get the Chaos Emeralds, but it is encouraged that you go after them, so I think this is a fair criticism. The Origins collection lets you retry special stages in exchange for coins, but I stopped myself from using this feature to emulate the original game better. But I would definitely recommend using it, since the special stages are a little jank. Or just skip the Chaos Emeralds altogether. The graphics are great, especially for the time. The stages are vibrant and colorful, and I like how all the characters look. I appreciate all the personality in the sprites, like Eggman's constant smirking, or Sonic getting bored and judging you during his idle animation. And then there's the music, which is so good. You can always count on Sonic games to deliver some of the best video game music. I love the soundtracks in this series so much. In 2023, I went to the first Sonic Symphony concert in the US, which was in LA. Sonic 1 doesn't have my favorite soundtrack, but there are some superb songs here. I think Green Hill Zone's theme is my favorite, but I also really vibe with Starlight Zone's music. Every level has power-ups for Sonic to use. You'll find item boxes in the stages that contain an instant 10 rings, running shoes that temporarily increase your speed, a one-time use shield that protects you from dropping your rings, and temporary invincibility that also plays a catchy little song. It's always nice to pick these up. The boss fights are against Dr. Eggman, and you need to hit him 8 times to defeat him. Well, except in Labyrinth Zone, where it's just a chase against rising water and hazards. The fights are pretty simple, and before you know it, he's already defeated. The hardest one is definitely the final boss. I really like the idea behind it. You have no rings, and have to fight Eggman as 2 pistons try to crush you, one of which he's in. And then you have to dodge these energy balls that home in on you, so make sure to delay your run. It's not hard, but it's neat. Sonic takes down Eggman, and the day is saved. The Chaos Emeralds then fly away, with the mysterious 7th one joining in. More on that later. And that was Sonic the Hedgehog. I really like this game. It's so rewarding to blast through stages and explore their different paths. It's not perfect by any means, because some of the zones are a bit of a slog, and the special stages aren't great, but it's still fun. Especially if you play a modern version that gives you access to more characters and abilities for Sonic, which elevates the experience by adding even more replayability and speeding up the game more. Regardless, the original Sonic the Hedgehog is a classic, and I'd recommend playing it. It still holds up 30 years later. Sonic 1 sold extremely well. It helped Sega generate $1 billion in console sales. That is crazy. Sega had the iconic mascot they wanted, and they set out to make a sequel to their smash hit. In fact, they developed 2 sequels at the same time. These were Sonic 2 and Sonic CD. Sonic 2 was released first, but Sega has decided with Sonic Origins and the Sonic Symphony show that CD actually comes next in the timeline, so that's the game we're going to talk about now. I understand their reasoning, because there's a lot more in common between Sonic 1 and CD than there is between Sonic 1 and 2. CD was even conceived as a port of Sonic 1 before they decided to make a new title instead. Yuji Naka went to work on Sonic 2, while Naoto Oshima worked on CD as its director. The game was made to promote the Sega CD, an add-on for the Genesis that was more powerful and used discs instead of cartridges. The Sega CD didn't have many great games, and was kind of a flop. But Sonic CD has always been considered one of the few gems in its library. Speaking of gems, I first played the game on the Sonic Gems collection on the GameCube in December 2010. I didn't enjoy it much because the collision was janky and I thought the special stages were hard. Still, it was fun getting to play it, and it's easily the best game on this very weird collection. Seriously, the only other value I got out of owning this is if you have one friend who has a Sonic R hyperfixation. Oh my god, I'm gonna have to cover Sonic R at some point. 1 year later in December 2011, Taxman developed a remastered version of Sonic CD for the PS3 and Xbox 360. I remember begging my parents to let me buy this because it was only $5, and they finally relented. So I played the port and I was blown away. My issues with the original game were fixed, and it was now so much fun. I played this game all the time growing up on my PS3. It's one of the Sonic games I have the most experience with, and a personal favorite of mine. For this review, I'll be focusing on the Taxman port on the Origins collection, but like the last game, I won't be using the Sonic 2 Spin Dash or additional characters. However, the improved collision and special stages are fair game in my opinion. If that seems a bit arbitrary, I understand. I think it's fine though, especially because I imagine this is the version most people have played, since Sonic CD and the Gems Collection weren't the most popular games when they released, unlike Sonic 1. The plot is once a year, this place called Little Planet shows up, except this time Eggman anchors it and seeks to conquer it. Time travel is possible on the planet, and Eggman uses this to take control of its past and future. It's up to Sonic to stop him. Along the way, we meet some new characters. The first is Amy Rose, a pink hedgehog who likes tarot cards and falls in love with Sonic upon meeting him. But immediately after this, a robot copy of Sonic built by Eggman called Metal Sonic kidnaps her. So Sonic also has to rescue Amy now. It's cool how the series is already adding new characters. And Amy is my second favorite character in the whole series behind Sonic. I like how she flips the script of typical love interests by being the one who always pursues him, and he's too cool to care about dating. Sonic has some new abilities this time around. If you hold down and press the jump button, he charges up a move called the Spin Dash that gives him an instant burst of speed. This is a nice feature, but it takes a while to charge up, so I prefer using the other ability, the Super Peel Out. You activate this by holding up and jump, and it basically does the same thing as the Spin Dash, except it doesn't start Sonic in the ball form, but it's faster and looks cooler. Both are extremely useful to gain ground speed quickly, and I use them all the time. They feel like natural extensions to Sonic's movement options, and it makes Sonic 1 harder to go back to, because I'm just so used to spin dashing around everywhere. Sonic CD is structured identically to the last game, with each zone having 3 acts, and special stages being accessible at the ends of Acts 1 and 2, so long as you have 50 rings. This time around, the Act 3s only contain the boss fights that work a bit differently. You no longer have to hit Eggman 8 times. Instead, each battle has a gimmick, like running on a treadmill, or launching yourself up to hit him, like Sonic's the ball in a game of pinball. What sets CD apart from Sonic 1 are the levels themselves. Naoto Oshima wanted to focus more on platforming and exploration, rather than speed. Each stage has these signposts, labeled past and future. If you build up enough speed, sparks appear behind Sonic, that eventually let him time travel to those periods. The past and the future have some different level design, and are visually distinct from the present. They even have different music, which is a great touch. The reason you want to time travel is in the past there are these robot generators created by Dr. Eggman. If you destroy them, all the enemies in the past and the future are eliminated, and after you clear the goalpost, you're told Sonic made a good future. You can actually see this in the act if you go to the future after destroying the robot generator. By default, the future is gloomy with unsettling music because Eggman rules over it. But once the generator is destroyed, the future becomes more serene and joyful with animals roaming around free. And because the enemies are gone, getting into the special stages with 50 rings is much easier, which I appreciate. The third act of a zone is always in the future, and it'll only be a good one if you destroy the generators in the first 2 acts. If you want to obtain the good ending, you need to destroy all the robot generators in each of the 7 zones. If that sounds like too much work, there's thankfully another method. When you beat a special stage, Sonic receives a time stone. If you collect all 7 of them, every bad future becomes a good one, and you automatically get the good ending, even if you never destroyed a single robot generator. So you now have 2 methods to get the good ending. The way I play this game is a little weird. I call it the All Good Futures Lazy Route. This is where I destroy the robot generators, and I complete the special stages. Then when I have all the time stones, I just cut down on time traveling, because I already have the good ending. It's a little odd, because all the levels are really designed to be explored, so the second half of the playthrough, where I'm primarily running to the end, feels kinda wrong, but I love the special stages too much to not do them. They are such an improvement over Sonic 1. They're in 3D, and the objective is to destroy 6 UFOs before the time runs out. If you run into water, that speeds up the timer, so you want to avoid that. These are a thrill in the Taxman port, because while they can be a little chaotic with the UFO patterns, they still feel fair because the controls are solid. And if you play well, you should usually win, because a special UFO always appears when there are 20 seconds left that gives you an extra 30 seconds if you hit it. Special stages are some of my favorite parts of Sonic games, and these are some of the best in the series. Hunting for robot generators is also a blast. They're not that hard to find if you properly explore the stages, but the real challenge is getting to the past in the first place. You need to find level design that will give Sonic consistent speed to time travel, because if he slows down during the spark animation, you're not only stuck in the present, but you also lose the ability to get into the past or future until you find another signpost. Time traveling can be tricky, because the levels in Tenchi have more platforming and obstacles that block constant velocity. However, when you succeed and get Sonic into the past, it feels very satisfying because you earned that speed and are about to be rewarded for it. This is a much better way to make a Sonic game more centered on platforming than Marble and Labyrinth Zone, and it's so unique because no other game in the series plays like this. Oh, and I should mention that in the past, there are these projectors in Metal Sonic you can find and destroy. These don't affect anything, but it'll make you feel better before the robot uprising in 5 years. Wait, what? So with all the talk about the past, I guess you're wondering what's there to do in the future. The answer is not much. You almost always want to avoid future signposts, except in rare occasions where they can get you into the past. That happened to me in Tidal Tempest Act 1, where I missed the past signpost and couldn't figure out how to get back to it. But I saw that there were future signposts everywhere, so I traveled there, and it turns out that altered the level design, so I can now reach the past signpost. Well, after I traveled back to the present, because you can't go directly into the future from the past, or the past from the future. The stages in CD are all solid. Every level is fun to play through, and none feel out of place in a fast and exploration-based platformer. Even the obligatory water level Tidal Tempest is fun because you barely have to be in the water if you're good enough to stick to the upper path. That is good game design. The interesting thing about the exploration focus is you feel like you know more about the acts after beating them, since you sometimes have to backtrack for the robot generators or good areas of time travel, which means you explore more of the alternate routes on your first playthrough. Assuming you play the stages similarly to how I do, that is, and aren't just running straight to the goalpost the whole time. The graphics are an improvement over Sonic 1 thanks to the Sega CD superior hardware. You can mainly see this in the time travel animation and the 3D special stages. Man, these backgrounds are super trippy. And of course there are the animated cutscenes the Sega CD was able to render that are really fun to watch. The intro cutscene even has a vocal track. In fact, it has 2 of them. Sega's marketing team in the US wasn't a big fan of the game's soundtrack, so they made a separate one without the Japanese staff knowing. Today in the modern releases, you can select either the US or Japanese version. Both are good, but please, always select the Japanese soundtrack. This might be my favorite one in the whole series. It's phenomenal. Oh my god, the Quartz Quadrant theme is literally one of the best songs in all of gaming. And before you ask, as much as I like the English vocal track Sonic Boom, Sonic You Can Do Anything is better. Sorry, but I don't make good opinions. I only possess them. The last thing to mention is Sonic actually has some voice lines. This is notable because I'm pretty sure it's the only time Classic Sonic ever speaks in the games. At the end of the penultimate zone Stardust Speedway, you face off against Metal Sonic in a race that can be a little challenging since he can dash ahead of you. If he beats you to the end or you're too slow, you'll die. But thanks to the power of walls, Metal Sonic explodes and you free Amy. After defeating Eggman in an easy final battle, Sonic saves Amy from the collapsing base and Little Planet is freed from its anchor. It thanks Sonic and takes off. We're treated to a great ending cutscene, and that's it for Sonic CD. I love this game. I didn't have much to criticize because I think it's a blast the whole way through. It's such a unique experience in the pantheon of Sonic games, thanks to its incredible music, great levels and special stages, and an exploration focus that still rewards speed. There's a reason why I've played it so many times in my life, and I'm only going to keep coming back for more. It's one of Sonic's greatest games. So that was fun. Next up is Sonic 2 and 3. I'll see you then. Sayonara.